Explore, expand, exploit, exterminate. These are the 4 X's that define a 4X strategy game. Many 4X games feel like a very generic game because they attempt to treat all aspects equally. A few can pull this off, but it's a rare thing indeed. Even games within the same lineage, such as the Civilization series, can have better or worse years. What happens though when you take a 4X game and throw out 3 of the 4 X's? You get Sword of the Stars. Sword of the Stars is not your average 4X. It's a game that is singularly focused on the extermination of your enemies through any means necessary. That is the clear goal from the opening cinematic, when you choose game start conditions, from the first time you open the tech tree, and it remains clear all the way until your opponents are out of worlds to call their own. In some ways this is great. It gives the game tremendous staying power among its player base, even a decade after release. In other ways, it proves to be a real detriment to itself. If you are not wholly invested in the idea of trial by combat, then it will become boring rather quickly. Let's take a closer look at the game. It's time for the lists. For the pros, first, the technical aspect of the game. For a game that released in 2006 originally, the developers had some incredible foresight. It runs beautifully at any standard 16:9 aspect ratio and actually utilizes multiple processing cores fairly well. On my personal rig, it spreads itself out fairly evenly across 3 of my 4 processing cores, meaning that even on older or underpowered hardware, at least by today's standards, it should still perform fairly well. It does limit the max frame rate to 60 frames per second, but that's not really a concern since most of the game is played in the system overview screen, which could run at around 10 frames per second and you wouldn't notice. Second, we come to graphics. While I personally don't care how good a game looks, many people do. While noticeably dated, the graphical style still holds up fairly well. That is a benefit to games like this though, since sci-fi ship designs tend to be quite angular in the first place. It hides some of the technical and graphical limitations of the time, and as such, it still holds up fairly well. Other graphical aspects of the game beyond that look stellar as well. Missile contrails, plasma bursts, explosions, and starfields are all very nicely rendered. Third, we have the ship design system. One thing about space strategy games that must be solid is your ship design system. Thankfully, Sword of the Stars does an excellent job of this. The design menu is simple and intuitive, gives you plenty of information about your ship itself, and gives you plenty of in-depth options for design. Ship designs are divided into a number of categories. You have destroyer, cruiser, dreadnought, station, defense platform, and a few others. Then within each of these categories you have a number of design options. Ships, for example, are divided into 3 segments: the bridge type, mission type, and engine type. As you research more equipment and technology, you get more options for each of these segments. Standard bridges are cheap, lightly armed and armored, and are really useful for utilitarian ships that won't see combat. Battle bridges, on the other hand, are more heavily armed and armored, perfect for a ship of the line that will be going toe-to-toe with its foes. These same principles apply to other ship sections as well, with specific mission and engine sections having particular uses and usefulness for various situations. I could go on, but that would turn this portion of the review more into a tutorial, and if you're interested in learning more, there will be a link in the description box to a tutorial series I'm currently producing about the game. At the time of recording, this video isn't up yet, but when it does go live, the link will be there. Finally, we have the lore of the game. This clearly was a huge focus for development. They built an hour's worth of reading into the game if you want to find out all there is to know about the 6 different races. Each race has a very lengthy and detailed bio that describes their cultural and technological history, as well as giving some very key hints about how to play for or against them. For example, the bio hints that the Hiver, an insect-like race in-game, have very heavily armored ships. In-game, they average roughly 10% more health than comparable vessels of other races. That means that they can survive longer in close-quarters combat. It's brilliant, really, and if you don't want to play the game, I'd recommend at least browsing the game's wiki page if you're into sci-fi storytelling. There's some good stuff. Now for the cons. First off, we have voice acting. It's not bad initially, it's just very clear that it was a low-budget addition to the game. Each alien race has a dozen or so lines that they will say depending on the specific race and situation, and they say them a lot. So much so that some of those lines drill into your brain and stay there to torture you. The problem is the worst with the humans, since they have no voice filters to add effects to them. The aliens at least get to sound like cool lizard people or dolphins or whatever, and although I suppose your mileage may vary with this point depending on your tolerance. The only other major con for this game is its diplomacy system. While playing with other people you get around this somewhat through using voice or text chat, but when dealing with AI opponents it's miserable. The menus are not laid out in a way that makes them easy to use or understand. They are severely lacking in functionality, and some things are incredibly vague in their wording. You would be forgiven for accidentally giving a whole planet to another faction as opposed to just giving them some information about that planet. Also, the AI are incredibly dogmatic in their particular brand of diplomacy. The Tarkas, a warlike reptilian race, will always refuse to sign peace treaties and ceasefire agreements, even if they're about to lose their homeworld. That means that if you ever start fighting them, you can't actually stop unless you kill them. Although, now that I think about it, all alien races except humans and Liar, which is a race of dolphins, will not sign peace treaties and ceasefire agreements, which really sucks because having space allies helps you kill your space enemies a whole lot faster. My conclusion? I really like this game. I bought it way back in 2006 when it came in an actual box. I bought it a few years ago on Steam as well, and I really enjoy playing it even today. Hell, I like it so much I'm doing a tutorial series for it that might not receive that many views. The player community has definitely declined following GameSpy's demise, as they were the ones who maintained the servers. Still, services like Evolve and Hitachi that simulate LAN play still make this a very enticing game, and the forums are alive and well, meaning that finding a game to play in isn't too difficult. Although, beware if you play with those guys right off the bat. They've been doing this for a long time. I would absolutely recommend this game to people who enjoy strategy games or just good sci-fi fun in general. It holds up well, plays great, and isn't very expensive. It's normally only $10 or your regional equivalent on Steam and goes on sale all the time, so set your drives to maximum and plot your course to purchase. That was my impression of the bad voice acting in-game. Anyways, if you would like to make a suggestion for a game review, feel free to do so in the comments below or send me a tweet at JMA4707. Until next time, bye-bye now.